Last month, we looked at all 47 ACE landmarks in North America and ranked them from worst to best. For those of you who don't know, ACE is the American Coaster Enthusiasts, the biggest coaster fan club in the country, if not the world. And on top of putting on awesome events, they also reward deserving coasters as an ACE landmark. These are mostly old wooden coasters that are still going strong, with some others that have a special place in coaster history. Today, let's turn our sights forward. ACE has been giving these out to 2 or 3 coasters every year, Sea Dragon at the Columbus Zoo and Blue Streak at Cedar Point being the most recent. So that begs the question, what's next? These are the coasters that could be future ACE landmarks. Just a note, 45 of the 47 landmarks are in the US, with 1 being in Canada and 1 in Mexico. We're gonna try and keep this inside North America, but I'll point out some coasters overseas that would be deserving. Let's break this up into different categories, and we'll start with coasters that deserve it for a specific reason. If you asked me to bet my house on what coaster will be getting the landmark status, I would choose Millennium Force at Cedar Point. Not only is this one of the most iconic coasters in the world, it was groundbreaking in multiple ways. It was the first modern, non-alpine coaster to use a cable lift. That shoots the train up the lift hill, and it was lighter than a normal chain lift, especially since they needed so much of it to climb 310 feet. And speaking of that 310 feet, this was the first full-circuit coaster to break the 300-foot mark, and thus, it was the first Giga coaster. There was another coaster that stood 400 feet, but it doesn't really get the credit because it's not a full circuit. That's Superman Escape from Krypton, or Superman the Escape when it opened. Not only is it 415 feet tall, it was also the first coaster to hit 100 miles an hour. On top of that, it was the first coaster to use an LSM launch, or linear synchronous motor. This has become the overwhelming choice of launch for every manufacturer, except S&S. They still use their compressed air launch. Superman had a sister coaster in Australia, Tower of Terror, but that closed down in 2019, and it's not in North America. Plus, Superman opened for a time in 1996, so technically it was the first to reach all these milestones, and it should get landmark status for that. Superman was the first to use an LSM launch, but it was not the first to use an electromagnetic launch. That honor goes to Flight of Fear, opening in 1996 at Kings Island and Kings Dominion. This was built by Premier Rides, and it would use the LIM launch, or linear induction motor. It's funny that this and Superman were being built at the same time. Superman by Intamin, and they were working on similar but different launch systems. I think King's Dominion's open first, but they both can get landmark status for being pioneers of the electromagnetic launch. LIMs fell out of style in the mid-2000s, but Vekoma is bringing it back with Dollywood's Big Bear Mountain in 2023. Speaking of launches, Accelerator at Knott's Berry Farm was the first to use a hydraulic launch. This is a complex system, using fluid to power a wheel that pulls a launch cable. That's a very simple explanation, but the bottom line is, this launch system opened doors that people never thought possible. Accelerator was the pioneer. Intamin used this launch a lot over the next decade, and even though it fell out of favor after 2010, it was used to break all the major coaster records. One of those records was the world's tallest coaster, and when Topsfield Dragster opened in 2003, it stood at 420 feet. That alone should give it landmark status, the world's first strata coaster. Its 120 mile/hour top speed has been broken twice, also by hydraulic launch coasters, and Topsfield Dragster will reopen in 2024, looking different than what we've gotten used to. But no matter what happens, nobody can take away its status as the first 400-foot coaster. More coasters that paved the way for others. Let's go to Six Flags Magic Mountain for X2. 10 years before this opened as X, Batman the Ride opened at Six Flags Great America as the first inverted looping coaster. That received the landmark status, so I think X2 should be honored for being the first coaster with wing seating. This coaster was groundbreaking in so many ways, including that extra set of rails that flip the seats. But if nothing else, give X2 credit for being the first to put riders on the side of the track, something that has become very popular for different manufacturers. Right before X opened, Paramount's Great America was introducing Stealth, the first real attempt at a large-scale flying coaster. There had been some attempts at a small single-rider flying coaster in the 90s, but Stealth was a different beast. Built by Vekoma, this would have some elements on the rider's back on top of the track, but most of the ride on the rider's stomach below the track. Stealth was moved to Carowinds, now known as Nighthawk, and for inspiring the modern flying coaster that we know today, it deserves landmark status. I said most of the ACE landmarks are old wooden coasters, and this next one may not sit well with the ACE faithful. New Texas Giant was the first RMC Iron Horse conversion, opening at Six Flags Over Texas in 2011. It took an aging wooden coaster in the Texas Giant, tore out the wood track, replacing it with steel track, giving it an entirely different layout. For as much as old wooden coasters are celebrated, maybe the RMC treatment isn't seen as something that should be celebrated. But RMC's impact on the industry has been profound, and you could even say they breathed new life into old coasters that were losing popularity. When you think of iconic coasters, you have the Coney Island Cyclone and the Beast at Kings Island. Those already have their Ace plaque. You also have Millennium Force. We already said that's on the fast track to be an Ace landmark. But how about Space Mountain at Magic Kingdom? Opening in 1975, this is a timeless classic. This has inspired other space mountains at other Disney parks, racing through space at 30-something miles an hour, full of dips and turns, not being able to see anything but the stars. Everyone knows and loves Space Mountain. It's always one of the most popular coasters in the park, and the original in Florida should get its due. If you're in California riding the Space Mountain at Disneyland, you might take a ride over to LA in the Santa Monica Pier. This is where you're going to find the Santa Monica West Coaster. This ride defines Pacific Park, the one you see in all those live shots during LA sporting events, the one you can ride in Grand Theft Auto. And even though it's just a small mine train style coaster, you could argue it has that icon status. We talked about the Beast, and that rightfully has been an Ace landmark since 2004, but there is a coaster out there that has been called the Steel Beast, Dragon Mountain at Marineland. This R.LUM.R climbs a mountain, a change of elevation of 186 feet, covers 5,500 feet of track, and goes through 4 inversions. This is celebrating its 40th anniversary this year, and given its size, setting, and overall weirdness, maybe this can be a contender. I'm just gonna throw out a few more here. Any coaster that set a new record for most inversions. Corkscrew at Cedar Point, Carolina Cyclone at Carowinds, and Viper at Darien Lake can all claim this, and they're still around. Vortex at Kings Island and Shockwave at Six Flags Great America also did this, but those are gone. From there, you have to go outside North America. You have Dragon Con at Port Aventura, Colossus at Thorpe Park, and the current champ that we'll talk about in a second. I think Viper at Magic Mountain could also be considered, the last remaining R.LUM.R, now 33 years old and having outlasted its counterparts by decades. Okay, now for those coasters outside of North America. I mentioned the current inversion champ. That's over at Alton Towers, the Smiler. The inversion record had been ticking up one by one, 2 at the most, and then the Smiler comes along and blows it all away, going from 10 to 14. At 10 years now, nobody has dared to touch this record. And although I'm convinced this will be broken sometime soon, the 14 inversion bar deserves some love. Now, let's focus on drops. Staying in the same park, Oblivion was the first coaster to feature a vertical drop. It wasn't fully vertical. B&M had not invented the spring-loaded wheels back in 1998, so Oblivion only had a drop of 88.8 degrees. Still, the spirit of the vertical drop is what matters. That was this ride's selling point, and just about every manufacturer has their own take on the vertical drop. Some take it even further. That brings me to my next landmark overseas, Vild's Finet at Bonbonland in Denmark. Opening in 2003 and built by R.LUM.R, this was the first beyond vertical drop at 97 degrees. This has been a huge asset for manufacturers over the last 20 years, taking it further and further, the record now at 121.5 degrees. R.LUM.R uses this to build small-scale thrilling coasters, and now it's common to see a coaster go beyond 90 degrees. This includes B&M, the ones who came up with Oblivion at 88.8 degrees. They opened Dr. Diabolical's Cliffhanger in 2022 at 95 degrees. We know most of the Ace landmarks are old wooden coasters, so how many old woodies are still out there without a plaque? These are all the coasters to keep an eye on. Roller Coaster at Idlewild opened in 1938, a PTC woodie that stands 27 feet with 900 feet of track, perfect for kids at a park like Idlewild. Comet at Waldameer is another small-scale PTC coaster, opening in 1951 and standing 37 feet tall, covering 1,300 feet of track. High Roller at Valleyfair opened with the park in 1976, built by the same company that built the park. It has an L-shaped layout, standing 70 feet tall and covering almost 3,000 feet. Tornado at Adventureland opened in 1978, a William Cobb out-and-back woodie that runs alongside a lake, 93 feet tall and 2,840 feet long. Finally, we have Skyliner at Lakemont Park. This PTC woodie opened in 1960 at Roseland Park in New York, moving to Lakemont in 1987. Another L-shaped coaster standing 60 feet and covering 2,400 feet. I'm not saying any of these are remarkable or deserving, but given their age, they seem to have a good shot. You also have some old steel coasters to consider, starting with bobsleds at Seabreeze. This opened in 1954 with steel angle iron track, and if it still had that, it may have already been honored. Instead, in 1962, just 3 years after Matterhorn opened at Disneyland, it adopted the steel tubular track. Regardless, this is a cool looking old coaster, standing 31 feet and covering 1,240 feet. Then there's Gemini at Cedar Point. When this opened in 1978, it claimed to be the tallest and fastest coaster in the world. That wasn't exactly true, but it was a remarkable coaster for its time, and in just 5 years, it'll be celebrating its 50th anniversary. That would be a great time to deem this an ace landmark. Some coasters may be considered for landmark status for the reason of excellence, not necessarily breaking records, but maybe landmarks one day for being the best of their generation. I can see this going to Fury 325 at Carowinds and El Toro at Six Flags Great Adventure. Velocicoaster is an amazing ride, combining thrills with world-class theming. Boulder Dash goes up and down the side of a mountain, winning awards, and being one of the most unique wooden coasters in the world. Nemesis at Alton Towers is almost 30 years old, getting a retrack this year, and it's remarkable for offering such a great ride while staying under the tree line. The park had to double their budget just to dig all the trenches they needed to make this ride work. Finally, the Voyage is just a masterpiece of engineering, using terrain to perfection, all while offering one of the best ride experiences ever. The last category is the Funk Classics. These coasters deserve landmark status but aren't around to receive it. Colossus at Six Flags Magic Mountain opened in 1978 as the world's tallest and fastest coaster. Also was featured a lot in pop culture, and a lot of people were not happy when this was shut down in favor of RMC. Hypersonic XLC at King's Dominion was the first ever air-powered launch coaster, propelling trains at rates of speed never seen before. The Bat at Kings Island was the first modern coaster to hang under the track, and although it only lasted for parts of 3 seasons, it paved the way for the next generation of suspended coasters, and eventually the inverted looping coaster. The Crystal Beach Cyclone was deemed the most extreme coaster ever built, just a twisted mess of track that whipped its riders around, lasting 20 years from 1926 to 1946. Volcano the Blast Coaster at King's Dominion was the first inverted coaster to have a launch, a new concept that would be adopted by other manufacturers. Finally, King Cobra at Kings Island was the first coaster to be built as a stand-up coaster. Other Japanese coasters had been retrofit before this opened in 1984, but this led the way for dozens of stand-up coasters over the next 15 years. The concept being revived in 2023 with SeaWorld Orlando's Pipeline the Surf Coaster. That's all for this video. Let me know what you think of my picks, and if there are any other coasters deserving of ace landmark status, either in North America or around the world. Before you go, don't forget to drop a like, and if you're new here and love coasters, please give me a sub. Also, check out my links below for my Discord server, and my second channel where I post copyright-free off-ride footage, and my baseball channel if you also happen to love baseball. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you all next time.